In this video, we'll be going over gas stations. So there are n gas stations along a circular route where the amount of gas at the ith station is gas I. You have a car with an unlimited gas tank and it cost of I of gas to travel from the ith station to its next station at I plus 1. You begin the journey with an empty tank at one of the gas stations. So given two integer arrays, gas and cost, return the starting gas station index if you can travel around the circuit once in a clockwise direction. Otherwise, return -1 if we have failed to find the starting index. If there exists a solution, it's guaranteed to be unique. So in our first example, we're given this amount of gas and also the cost. So this is the gas stations and the cost to move from one index to the other. So if we start from index 3, starting at here, we were able to go around the gas station once after accounting for the cost. Let's go over the thought process. So the brute force approach will be to perform a nested for loop to test out all of the starting indices. This approach will cost us O of n squared time complexity. So we will need to optimize the brute force approach. So in the brute force approach, for each of the starting index starts, if we have failed to go around the circuit at I, we will need to start again from start plus 1. So instead of starting again, instead of going backwards to start plus 1, we can save some information about our current routes. So if we are currently at index I, we can get to the next station if our current gas minus the cost of the current index is greater than or equal to 0. But if we cannot get to the next station, at I plus 1, we can save the amount of deficit instead. We can save the amount of deficit gas that we need. So the deficit is the cost minus the current gas tank. So our current gas tank, then we can have our starting index start from I plus 1 instead. After going to the last index, if our remaining gas tank, or if our remaining amount of gas, which we can call surplus, is greater than or equal to the deficit, this means we can go around the circuit once. Now let's go over the pseudocode. So we're going to create the following variables. So we're going to create our starting index, keeps track of starting index, which can initially be -1. And then we can have our surplus, which is basically the amount of gas tank, the amount of gas in our current tank, and also our deficit, the amount of gas that we needed. Then we're going to iterate through the indices of the input rate, denoted as I. Since we're at this gas station, we're going to increment our surplus by the amount of gas at the current station. Now we want to check if our current amount of gas will allow us to get to the next station. So if surplus is greater than or equal to gas I, this means we can get to the next station. So we can have set, actually our starting index can start from 0, and then we can update it as we go. So if surplus is greater than or equal to gas, we can go to the next station. So we will decrement our surplus. Is greater than or equal to the current cost. Decrement surplus by the cost of getting to the next station. Else we want to, we do not have enough gas to go to the next station, so we want to save the amount of deficit that we need. So we want to increment deficit by the cost of I minus the current amount that's in our tank. Then we can set our starting index to I plus 1. Then we're going to reset our surplus to 0, which basically means resetting the current amount of gas in our current gas tank to 0. Now, if surplus is greater than or equal to deficit, this means we can go around the circuit once, so we can just return the starting index. Else, this means we cannot go around the circuit once, so we can just return -1. Now let's go over the time and space complexity. For the time complexity is of n, where n is the length of the input array. This is because we visit each index once. And then our space complexity is of 1. Now let's go over the code. So we're going to create the following 3 variables. Our current starting index, initially 0. Our surplus, the current amount of gas in our tank. And then also the deficit. Then we're going to iterate through the indices of the input array. Then we're going to increment the current surplus by the amount of gas at the current gas station. Now, if surplus is greater than or equal to the current cost, this means we can get to the next station. So we can just decrement by the current cost to get to the next index. Else, we want to save the current information and allow our starting index to start from start plus 1 instead. So we're going to increment deficits. So deficits increment by the current amount of deficits. So it's the cost of moving to the next index minus the current amount in our gas tank. Then we want to have a starting index start from the next index, and then we want to reset our current amount of gas in our tank to 0. Then we'll return if surplus is greater than or equal to the deficit. This means we can go around the circuit once, and we can have it start from the starting index, so we can just return start. Else, we cannot go around the circuit, so we can just return -1. Let me know if any questions in the comment section below.